Good afternoon. I'm Robert White, council member at large and chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2024, and the time is now 1:06 p.m. and we are meeting in room 123 of the John A. Wilson Building, and I'm calling to order this additional meeting of the committee. Today, we will be considering two bills. The first on the agenda is Bill B25-742, the Youth Mentorship Through Community Engagement Act of 2024. I introduced this bill as one piece of my Safer Today, Safer Tomorrow package, which includes measures aimed at addressing the root causes of youth violence and keeping DC's young people safe. About 2 years ago, we saw a sharp spike in violent crime in the district, including too many crimes involving young people. The impacts are tragic and impossible to ignore. Whether young people are committing crimes, victims of crimes, or witnessing crimes, increased violence is devastating for the future of the district's youth. An increase in crime like that doesn't just happen spontaneously, and a responsible solution should focus on prevention as much as it does on response. That's where this youth mentorship bill comes in. Again, I want to be clear, this isn't instead of accountability. This is an addition and a measure to have fewer young people committing crimes in the first place. This bill contains two key solutions. First, it creates a professional mentorship program for youth who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs include a range of traumatic events like abuse, poverty, or living with adults that struggle with substance abuse. And research shows that experiencing ACEs in childhood is associated with worse health and behavioral outcomes, including crime, later in life. Research also shows us that early interventions and consistent long-term mentorship from a professionally trained adult can help prevent youth from engaging in criminal behavior. The mentorship program created by this bill will train professional, full-time mentors and pair them with young people that have experienced ACEs. Mentors will spend at least 3 hours a week with their mentee and will meet regularly with the youth's family, school, and community to really take a comprehensive approach. The second key part of this bill creates a community service leave program for district employees to spend 1 hour each week mentoring or tutoring youth. This allows the city to lead by example and increases the pool of mentors across the city by thousands. On October 3rd, we held a public hearing on this bill and heard passionate testimony about the benefits of mentorship. We also received some constructive feedback that is reflected in the committee print. First, the bill originally proposed that mentors and mentees would be paired for at least 3 years or until the mentee graduated high school. Advocates suggested that mentees would benefit from mentorship during and after graduation, which can be a really difficult period of transition. We also recognize that some mentees may not graduate or may not graduate on a traditional timeline. Given that, we removed the graduation language and changed it to 3 years or until the mentee withdraws from the program. The second substantive change relates to the government leave provision. Originally, employees would qualify for community service leave after 6 months of employment. However, we heard from the Department of Human Resources that the standard probation period for district employees is 12 months, and they suggested this community service leave mirror the citywide standard. We agree, so the committee print includes that update. During the hearing, we also heard a couple of concerns from DHS. First, they expressed that they don't have adequate funding to implement the program because the original bill set a start date of FY25. However, we removed that language and the bill won't go into effect until it is funded, so that issue should be resolved. DHS also suggested that funding could be directed to their other programs that offer mentorship instead of creating a new one. While the current programs are wonderful resources, a key part of this provision is that the mentors are full-time employees who are closely connected to the youth and their families, which is what sets this program apart. I'm excited about this bill because I know from my own experience how influential good mentors can be. I want to give a personal shout out to one of my mentees, Aaron, who has an important interview today, and he and I spoke last night about what more he needed to do to prepare. When I talk to young people from our city, they tell me in no uncertain terms that they are looking for more guidance and mentorship, and it's about time that we listen. Before we vote, is there any discussion on Bill B25-742? Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you so much, Chairman White, for your work on this bill and your focus on this important issue. I am thrilled to support it today and just wanted to add that I think as we think about other ways that we can support our young people across the district, it is really important to recognize that young people, like adults, are not a monolith and have a diversity of interests and paths that may excite them. And so as we continue to think about ways to provide that support, whether that's mentorship, which I think this is a great program, or additional job opportunities or after school programming, in all my conversations with kids across our city, there are so many different types of interests and skills that they have to offer. And I think that will continue to be really important to listen to them about what's going to work for them as we shape their future. So thank you very much and look forward to supporting this bill today.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Pinto. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Councilmember White. I too would just applaud efforts to expand mentorship. It is proven by research as well as in folks' lived experience that mentorship pays great dividends in terms of putting young people, and I would argue all people, on the right path. I do have two questions. One is around DHS's capacity to run this type of program. I know there have been colleagues who have raised questions or concerns around DHS's capacity to run other programs around truancy, around its existing programs. And so what reassurance have you received from the agency or elsewhere to ensure that we can pull this new program off with fidelity? That's one question. And then I have a second question around just the impact for the cost. And so I did look at the FIS, and it seems like it's running upwards of $1 million and about $8 million over the financial plan, if I recall correctly. How many young people are expected to be impacted with that cost? And what I'm getting at is this the best investment, albeit worthwhile generally, or is it better to invest our limited resources in other proven programs? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, those questions, Councilmember Parker. Let me take them in reverse order. With respect to your question around, do we get enough bang for the buck? Obviously, if we put more funding, we could mentor more young people, and that's always going to be the case. But in addition to professional mentors, this bill also creates an army of mentors through DC government. And so I don't think we get a better bang for our buck comprehensively than through this method. With respect to the agency's ability to implement this and the appropriateness of having this program within DHS, I personally think that Child and Family Services Agency should be doing a lot more, but they're not in a position to do a lot more right now. But DHS already does have mentorship programs. This will not stretch their staff thin. One, because we would have to give them funding, but two, and more importantly, because this will be a grant program. So DHS employees will not be the professional mentors. They will administer a grant program similar to other mentoring grant programs they operate. With that, I move Bill B25-742, the Youth Mentorship Through Community Engagement Act of 2024, with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
Councilmember White, can you record me as present?
Yes, you'll be recorded as present. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it with 2 yes votes, and Councilmember Zachary Parker marked as present. Our second bill today is B 25-827, the Pets in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. This bill is really about our families. More than a third of district residents have pets as part of their family. My family was one of them, with my pit bull, Roscoe, who lived a long life with me, my wife, and my daughters. I was happy that Roscoe lived to see me introduce this bill, but unfortunately, he passed this summer at 14 years old before we could get it into law. We could not have asked for a more loving dog as a friend to my daughters and a supporter for me after long work days. I called Roscoe a girl dog because he was frequently a guest at tea parties and Barbie parties, often with outfits. I know from my own experience and from research that people with pets like Roscoe tend to have better physical and mental health, lower stress and anxiety, less loneliness, and more physical exercise. We keep our pets because they make our lives better. But I recognize my family is also lucky enough to own our own home. Most district residents don't have that privilege. Renters in the district with pets are facing a proliferation of increasing pet rents, security deposits, and fees, adding big expenses for families looking to share the benefits of pet ownership. The fees being charged are often not connected to actual costs for housing providers and have totally illogical results, like charging hundreds of dollars in extra rent and deposits for even small pets like guinea pigs or ferrets. Those charges can add up over time when we know many people are struggling just to pay rent, and our lowest income residents are hurt the most. The Pets and Housing Act is for them. Other families like mine that own pit bulls or other safe, loving dog breeds can be barred from housing entirely because of outdated and discriminatory stereotypes that have no basis in science. These breed bans took effect when certain dog breeds became associated in the media with racist narratives about crime and drugs. The outcome of these bans has been to reinforce housing segregation and redlining of neighborhoods in the district and across the country. That's part of why breed bans are opposed by the CDC, the local HRA, the Humane Society, the American Veterinary Medical Association, the ASPCA, and just about every other organization that knows dogs. Multiple states are moving to end this practice of a half dozen major and a half dozen major insurance companies already have. High costs for housing, pets, and breed bans are not good for families, and they're not good for pets. The district's animal shelter is overflowing, particularly with perfectly good, well-behaved dogs who happen to be the wrong breed or whose owners simply couldn't afford exorbitant added charges to house them. We heard at the hearing about the extreme trauma that district residents are going through nearly every day when forced to leave their dog at a shelter because they simply can't find a safe, affordable home that accepts them. The Pets and Housing Act is for every family who has had to experience the pain and loss of having to give up a pet. We also see residents living on our streets, having lost almost everything in their life, clinging to their dog or cat as their companion through the worst circumstances. And when the weather turns cold, many of those residents choose to stay on our streets rather than go into our shelters because they'd have to abandon their dog or cat to get inside. We know what happens. We know that happens because we hear the stories from those who've experienced it firsthand. The Pets and Housing Act is for every person who wants to come inside from the cold but won't give up their best friend. I'll be honest, I didn't write the first drafts of this bill or the research to support it. The students, faculty, and supporters of the George Washington University Animal Welfare Project did that. I am also not the chief advocate of this bill. That would be our friends in the People and Paws Coalition, like Kelly Whittier, the Humane Society, the ASPCA, DC Voters for Animal, the Animal League Defense Fund, and the hundreds of district residents who've reached out in support. And I'm probably not the most convincing reason to support this bill. That would be the puppies that showed up in force at our press conference to announce the introduction of this bill back in May. The Pets and Housing Act is for them. I'm here to do my part to make their work into law. I understand the news these days can feel dark and hard to process. We probably have some hard days coming, but for at least 30,000 years or so since we first started living with dogs, and a few thousand years after that, when the first cat strolled up to the fire, demanded food, and took a nap, we've been able to handle tough times better with our pets by our side. So there's no better time than right now for pets and housing. I ask for the support of my colleagues for this bill because this bill isn't for me, it's for our residents. I move Bill B25-827, the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024, with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. Are there any comments? Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you very much, Chairman White. I am excited to support this bill today. And I know this legislation is especially important for people and families who are experiencing homelessness, who have pets. Pets are often like family, as you described, and can provide serious emotional support and stability during very difficult times. And it's important to ensure that there are housing options that allow residents and their families to stay with their beloved pets. When I first ran for the council, I heard about this issue from many residents about the need for pet inclusive housing and shelters. And so I'm especially glad to see this move forward today. I do want to recognize some concerns that have been raised throughout the process of this bill. I understand that the prohibition of entire pet breeds and weight restrictions is critical for equitable housing access. And I also want to acknowledge some of the concerns that have been raised by constituents who have experienced fear or trauma with pets. I recently met with a constituent, for example, who was attacked by a neighbor's pet dog and is understandably concerned about the breed restrictions being lifted. And it's important to acknowledge these experiences and find ways, both as for the city and for enforcement and for housing, to address them thoughtfully. We've also read a lot of research on this, and we know that most pet breeds will never attack or harm a person or another pet. Harmful interactions between pets and humans often can be prevented. However, breed restrictions are not an effective way of preventing harmful interactions writ large between pets and humans. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control, American Veterinarian Medical Association, and the National Animal Control Association have all called into question differential treatment of dog breeds, indicating that dog behavior has more to do with training and treatment of the dog than the dog's breed itself. The CDC did an analysis of dog bite related fatalities and found that almost all of them were preventable, indicating that the breed was not a predeterminative factor. Additionally, while it has become common for homeowners and renters insurance policies to include dog breed restrictions, a number of our national insurers, including State Farm, Auto Owners, Chubb, USAA, and Allstate, have moved away from breed restrictions in this shared recognition that the breed itself is not the determinative factor whether or not a dog is violent. Rather, violence in dogs is most closely linked to how an animal is trained and treated, which is why I think it's really important that we continue to educate the public about responsible pet ownership and training for all pet owners, regardless of their pet's breed, to avoid situations where their pet may feel scared or threatened or attack another. It is equally important that DC Health responds promptly and appropriately to any incident where a human is hurt or attacked by a pet. And so with that, I support this bill, and I want to thank Chairman White and the Committee on Housing on moving this important bill forward. We know too many residents and families lose their home or give up their pets or have to go to another option because of these policies. And so I believe this bill takes an important step forward for housing equity and inclusion and recognition that people love their pets and are part of people's families. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Pinto, and I appreciate you flagging the importance of responsible pet ownership. It really is important. When folks are not responsible, it makes it harder for everyone. So thank you very much. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Councilmember White. And I will start with the component of the bill that would cap fees on renters that have pets, as well as policies that would prohibit certain breeds, and echo much of what has already been said. As a dog owner myself, I think this makes a lot of sense. both in terms of equity, but also ensuring that we can remove barriers to housing and barriers to loving families and individuals being able to own and keep their pets. I do have questions and I would say concerns around the second part. While seemingly well intended, I question whether or not the intent meets our current moment, where we do have a shelter capacity issue for humans. And as I read the legislation, it would call for the consolidation or the creation of a new shelter for individuals that would have pets. That raises concerns for me both around cost and or the impact on our current shelter system that is already having capacity issues in order to meet this new demand. I don't minimize it, but in terms of prioritizing our limited resources, I do question the intent there. So while I support the first part around removing barriers to certain breeds and capping fees, I can't support the second part of the legislation that would task DHS with upending our current shelter system. And instead, I think we would be better served in kind of doubling down to ensure we can provide housing for folk that are in desperate need of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. As we continue to work, as every jurisdiction in the U.S. does, to create more housing, something that does take a long time, we do have homeless people today. I do want to be clear, we do not in any way upend our homelessness system or our shelters. We don't require DHS to build new shelters. All we require is available space available for people with pets. That doesn't change our capacity at all. It just means if I'm homeless and I don't have a pet, I can go into the shelter. But if I'm homeless and I do have a pet, there is at least one shelter with at least one room that can accommodate me. And I think that is more fair to people than saying, well, if you have a pet, you either have to stay outside with that pet or you have to give that pet up. So it does not change capacity. It does not limit in any way access to shelter. In fact, it expands it. I hope to get your support before final reading and happy to work through it with you. With that, I move Bill B25-827, the Pets and Housing Amendment Act of 2024, with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Or record Councilmember Parker as voting no. With that, we have concluded the agenda for this meeting. I want to thank my colleagues for joining. The time is now 1:28 p.m. and this additional meeting of the Committee on Housing is adjourned.